I remember he at one point told me, he says, I got 7-to-1 gear ratios. I'm like, what? And 6.3-to-1 to 7-to-1 is a huge difference. That's like 7 or 8 inches per crank. And I was like, how'd you do that? And he actually had Japan, of course, put gears, or got gears made for his diodes he's using. So back then, I think he had the highest speed gear ratios for a while in the United States. And I remember I was jealous. I was like, gosh, that is so much better. I remember casting his reel and reeling. I'm like, that's good. That's much. 7-to-1 back then was like fire. It was super fast. And but that's really what I wanted the higher speed for. Is there's lots of reasons besides control. You can also, if you have fish busting, you have a long cast with a popper or a walking bait or a fluke or whatever, you gotta reel it in. And you guys know a 5.3-to-1 or a 6.3-to-1 is super slow. I mean, you reel is spinning and really coming back to you. And that was the main reason, was to be able to get another cast off to a fish busting or make another cast period. If you're on dead water, you can get it in quicker and then make another cast. So there's lots of reasons for high speed. And back then, the reels, I think he had the Team Daiwa, and I'm a Shimano, so they had the old Team Daiwa Z, or they were actually pretty cool reel. The thing is, they built the gear rush, they didn't know the swing on the reel. They didn't increase the swing on the handle enough, and also the gears were about the same size, just different shapes. They required a higher gear ratio, and that way you didn't have the leverage. Like you'd get a fish on, you'd go crank with those older reels that did that, and you'd have so much torque that a lot of times you feel like you'd break the reels a lot. Takahiro did break some reels. And I remember my first 7-to-1 reels that you tend to over torque on them, or it'd hurt you. Like they could do some damage to your arm. If you're cranking on a fish and it's like hard to turn, and the fish is barely moving, it can actually hurt you. So nowadays, I've been asking for a 9-to-1 for about 10 years. We'll see if that ever happens. Right now, Shimano's maxed out at 8.5-to-1, but we're also talking about, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, changing the gear ratio to more inches per turn. That's what you really need to know, because spool's very, a lot. I think right now we're about 4 sizes and bait casters you can get. It's different size spools. Some are, and I know Curado's kind of gone. Curado's a little wider, a little taller. But I'll talk about these in a little bit. But the spool size changed, so it's really inches per crank. Now, I'll talk about this, why it's up there. 7.4 is good. I like doing that. I mean, that for me is slow. The reason I do go to that one is because it does kind of, when you're throwing something like I'll put it out there, I'm sponsored by Reals, but like, I know everybody knows Wiggle Wart or some of these other baits like baby ends and stuff. I still throw some old stuff I keep with me. And Reals has some little, the shading bait, it's about 65 millimeters, so it's a small little bait, and it's borderline, it's borderline thrown on a bait caster spinning. And I have thrown crankbaits on spinning, but we're not going to talk about that too much. My mom, that's all she fishes. So I've actually tried it, and I'm jumping ahead, but it's possible to throw it on a bait caster nowadays. Like the reels I used 10 years ago, I don't think I could have thrown a lot of these baits. Or I remember throwing them, but they'd only go like 40, 50 feet. Nowadays, you can get actually 70, 80 feet out of it, and a lot more distance with the new technology, with the whole everything, the spool weights. It all helps you cast. And when I'm fishing really cold water, so cranking, I do like a 7.4 and I don't use it that much. I end up using my 8.5-to-1s, and I think it's something you have to get used to. 7.4-to-1 to me is, if you're used to 7-to-1s, is a good jump, but it's something you have to kind of. I like to use fluorocarbon and braid, and I notice I have fished nylon, which is monofilament, and you lose feel. And I think what I do is, of course I'm going to talk about rods too, but with a good sensitive rod with fluorocarbon or braid, you should be able to feel every beat of your bait. So if you're using a crankbait, I don't go by more like the speed I crank it, I go by the vibration of the feel through the rod, and that's everything I do. And actually, I'm running out of time. I want to talk about that too. There's a lot of things. This is a much easier one than the water pressure. There's all these different fluorocarbons. I know I'll probably have a lot of questions. There's finesse cranking. There's, Sunline's got a whole bunch of them. There's other brands that are very strong, but I noticed like the really strong ones kind of stretch. So the reel and The rod selection, I use, I don't want to get too confusing, but I use Sniper and Shooter by Sunline, which one is like more like a, kind of like a normal all-around fluorocarbon. It's got a little bit of stretch to it. It's softer, it casts good, but there's softer lines. And to let you guys know, if you guys are, the softer lines tend to last longer, and they cast a little easier. So a softer, stretchier fluorocarbon, the softer and stretchier you go, the longer it's going to last. But you also lose the sensitivity a little bit. So I like to keep the sensitivity side. The Sniper is kind of like a little bit on the stiff side in cold weather. They'd make a line that would perform better as far as casting. But you also, and it does get stiffer in cold water. It will stiffen up, kind of like plastic does. The rigidity, the actual, whatever the molecules contract and actually make the lines feel stiffer. It actually stiffens up. So Sniper I fished at Hartwell years ago when it was 7 degrees in the morning. It was still functional. But like if I would have had Shooter on there, for instance, it would have been a nightmare. That stuff, it really contracts hard. And, so the FC is like the finesse is going to be the easiest in cold weather. The sensitivity, the Sniper is going to be really good all around, but in the summertime, I don't want to jump too much. I'll just go ahead and cover the line. Are you up there? Oh, thank you. They're very good. The Shooter, to me, when the water gets above like air temperatures, you know, it gets in the 70s, 80s, to me is like my favorite. I don't want to lose you guys. The part that I adjust.
Welcome to Bass University TV, an online video training course where you'll learn champion bass fishing techniques from pro anglers Pete Gluzek, Mike Iaconelli, and their talented special guests. From on the water to in the classroom, you'll learn sound techniques and strong fundamental bass fishing skills. Watch hours of video content on multiple topics at your own pace for a low monthly fee. Cancel at any time. Information is power in the sport of fishing, so learn from the very best. Subscribe to Bass University TV today.